Welcome back to the deep dive. I have to admit, when I first looked at the subject for today, I had a very specific image in my head.
Oh, right.
You walk into an old church, maybe it's dimly lit, there's that smell of incense, and you see a statue of a nun. She's looking up at the ceiling, hands clasped, looking very peaceful, passive even.
The standard iconography, the
Yeah.
saint on a prayer card aesthetic.
Exactly. And usually when we cover historical religious figures, the story follows a pretty standard script.
Yeah.
They were born holy, they were nice to everyone, they prayed a lot, and then they died.
Right. A very clean, sanitized version of a life.
But then I started digging into the stack of notes and research you sent over for Teresa of Ávila, and I realized that the statue is, I don't want to say a lie, but it's definitely false advertising.
It is a massive oversimplification. I mean, if you actually look at the historical record, Teresa of Ávila was anything but passive.
Yeah.
We are talking about a woman who was complex, rebellious, often difficult, and just incredibly physically tough.
I mean, just looking at the deep dive mission we have here today, we're talking about a woman who founded 17 convents. 17.
Which is basically acting as a CEO of a massive startup expansion in 16th century Spain.
Right. And she faced down the Spanish Inquisition, which is not something people usually survived.
No, not at all.
She was a mystic who claimed to levitate, even though she hated it, and she wrote books that are still used today by psychiatrists.
And that's the key. She isn't just a religious figure, she's a psychological one. She's the first female doctor of the church, a title she shares with heavyweights like Augustine and Aquinas, but her approach was radically different.
How so?
She was mapping the human mind, the interior world.
And we have a ton of source material to get through to understand her. We've got her autobiography, La Vida.
Which is an amazing document, so honest.
We've got her guidebooks like The Interior Castle. We've got historical records of her canonization. And we have some truly bizarre accounts of what happened to her body after she died.
We will definitely get to the body. The postmortem history of Teresa is a genre all unto itself.
The zombie apocalypse section, as I've mentally labeled it.
That's not inaccurate, actually.
But before we get there, we need to understand the human being. Why does a 16th century Spanish nun matter to someone listening to this deep dive right now?
Because she provides a roadmap for the interior life. I mean, whether you are religious or not, Teresa was dealing with the noise of the world, distraction, anxiety, societal pressure.
Sounds familiar.
And she found a way to build a fortress inside her own mind. She influenced René Descartes. She influenced modern psychology. She figured out how to find silence in a world that wouldn't shut up.
So let's start at the beginning, part one. The unlikely saint. Because she was not born with a halo.
Not even close.
She's born in 1515 in Ávila. And right off the bat, there is a secret in her family tree that basically recontextualizes her entire existence.
This is crucial. If you missed this, you missed Teresa. She was born Teresa Sánchez de Cepeda, Dávila y Ahumada, a long, noble-sounding name. Her father, Alonso, was a wealthy wool merchant who had bought a knighthood. He was living the life of a respected Catholic nobleman. But this was a facade.
Because underneath the title, the family was converso.
Correct. Her paternal grandfather, Juan Sánchez de Toledo, was a Jew. In late 15th century Spain, the pressure to convert was immense, to put it mildly.
Convert or leave.
Or worse. So Juan converted to Christianity, becoming a converso. But in 1485, the Inquisition caught him.
What was the charge?
Judaizing. They accused him of secretly returning to Jewish practices, maybe keeping kosher, observing the Sabbath in private.
Things he'd grown up with his whole life.
Exactly. And in 1485, that wasn't just a social faux pas, that was a capital offense.
So what happened to him? Was he...
He wasn't burned, thankfully for the family, but he was subjected to the auto da fe. It means act of faith, but it was really a public shaming ritual, a form of psychological torture.
I've read about these. They were huge public spectacles.
Huge. Juan and his family, and this includes Teresa's father, Alonso, who was just a child at the time, they were forced to walk in a procession through the streets of Toledo for 7 consecutive Fridays.
7 weeks.
And they had to wear the San Benito. It was this ugly yellow tunic, and it was painted with crosses and flames. It was designed to be as humiliating as possible. It screamed to everyone who saw you, "I am a heretic. I am unclean."
And the consequences didn't stop when you took the shirt off, I assume.
No, not at all. Once you were marked, you were legally barred from holding public office, joining military orders, becoming a priest, or even wearing silk or jewelry. You were a second-class citizen for life. Your whole family was tainted.
So her grandfather is publicly shamed.
Mm-hmm.
Her father, Alonso, experiences this unbelievable trauma as a kid.
And his response is to run as far away from that identity as he possibly can.
He moves the family.
He moves the family to Ávila. He gets rich in the wool trade, and then he does something very clever. He buys a patente hidalguía, a patent of nobility, effectively paying the crown to say, yes, you are an old Christian. Your blood is pure.
He bought a new identity.
He erased the Jewish stain on the family name, or tried to.
So Teresa grows up in this household that is technically noble, technically pious, but underneath the surface, there's this massive, vibrating anxiety.
It's the anxiety of the imposter. They had to be more Catholic than the Pope, you know? Because any slip-up, any deviation from strict orthodoxy could bring the inquisitors knocking again.
And you can see that in her writings later on.
Oh, absolutely. She writes later about her scrupulosity, this obsessive fear that she was sinning, that she wasn't good enough. That didn't come from nowhere. It came from the generational trauma of being a Marrano family.
But despite all that heavy context, when she was a kid, she was kind of a firecracker.
She really was.
I love the story about her running away at age 7.
It's a classic. It tells you everything you need to know about her personality. At 7 years old, she and her older brother Rodrigo were reading the lives of the saints. And they were just fascinated by the martyrs, people who died for their faith and went straight to heaven.
And Teresa, being efficiency-minded, thought, why wait?
Exactly. She did the math. She realized that life is short and eternity is long. So if you want the maximum payout heaven for the minimum investment, a few minutes of pain martyrdom is the logical choice.
It's basically a loyalty rewards program hack for the soul.
It is. It's spiritual arbitrage. So she convinces Rodrigo to pack a bag, probably with some dried fruit and bread, and they run away from home.
Where were they even going?
They head out the gates of Ávila, intending to walk to the land of the Moors, so North Africa, where they hoped to be beheaded for the faith.
Come on, Rodrigo, let's go get decapitated.
Yeah.
That is a serious level of commitment for a 7-year-old.
It shows her absolute nature. She didn't do things by halves. She wanted forever and ever, as she used to chant.
So they didn't get very far.
No, of course not. They were caught by their uncle just outside the town walls and marched right back home.
Can you imagine the father's reaction? I bought a knighthood to keep us safe, and now my kids are trying to spark an international incident.
He was likely terrified, but as she got older, that intense religious zeal, sort of, it faded away. She entered her teenage years, and she pivoted hard.
She entered her mean girl era, or maybe her fashionista era.
A bit of both, maybe. The sources say she became obsessed with her appearance.
And this was after a major personal tragedy.
Yes. Her mother, Beatrice, died when Teresa was 14, and it was a devastating loss for her. Teresa coped by diving into the material world. She loved perfumes, she loved jewelry, she loved modifying her clothes to make them tighter and more flattering, which was pretty scandalous for a respectable young lady.
So she was rebelling.
Big time. She admits in her autobiography that she was incredibly vain.
And she was a reader, but not the Bible.
No, not at all. She was addicted to romance novels.
Oh, well.
Oh, yeah. Tales of chivalry, knights, damsels in distress, courtly love. These were the best sellers of the 16th century. Her father hated them. He thought they were trashy and would give her ideas.
Who, of course, she loved them.
She would hide them under her bed. She said later that she couldn't be happy unless she had a new book to read.
She sounds like a modern teenager. Don't talk to me, I'm reading.
Totally. She was charming, she was popular, she had suitors. So how on earth does she end up in a convent? Because based on her teenage years, that seems like the absolute last place she'd want to go.
It really does. It doesn't track.
It was. She explicitly wrote, I had the greatest possible aversion to being a nun. She did not want to do it. But she was looking at her options.
And for a woman in the 1500s, the options were pretty binary, weren't they?
Marriage or the convent. That was it. And marriage to Teresa looked like a trap.
Why a trap?
Well, look at her own mother. She had died young, completely exhausted by childbirth. Marriage meant total submission to a husband. It meant endless pregnancies. It meant losing your autonomy, your identity.
So the convent was a strategic move. A way out.
It was a risk assessment, a very cold-blooded one. She was terrified of hell. Again, you see that background anxiety. And she knew herself. She knew she loved the world too much. The parties, the clothes, the attention.
So she felt that if she stayed in the secular world,
she would inevitably sin and go to hell. So she chose the convent as a safe house. It wasn't about love for God initially. It was about fear for her soul and I think a deep desire for a room of her own, a life of the mind, independence.
So in 1535, at age 20, She runs away again. Second time's the charm.
She snuck out of the house early in the morning before anyone was awake and went straight to the convent of the Incarnation in Ávila. Her father was furious, but what could he do? Eventually, he had to accept it.
But this isn't where she lives happily ever after. This is where the story takes a really dark turn. Part 2. The physical and the mystical.
Yes.
Because almost immediately after becoming a nun, her body just completely shuts down on her.
It was a catastrophic collapse, and to this day, we still don't know exactly what it was. Medical historians have proposed everything from brucellosis from unpasteurized milk to malaria or maybe a severe autoimmune disorder, but the symptoms were terrifying.
Break it down for us. What was she dealing with on a daily basis?
Constant high fevers, fainting spells, just passing out without warning, and severe heart pains. She said it felt like sharp teeth were tearing at her heart.
That's a vivid description.
And then the worst of it, she fell into a coma.
A coma so deep they actually thought she was gone.
They did. She was unconscious for 4 days. The nuns at the convent dug a grave for her.
They dug her grave while she was still alive.
They were sure she was dead or about to die. They performed the last rites. They even put wax on her eyelids to keep them closed because her eyes were stuck open.
That is a nightmare image. Waking up and finding out everyone was ready to bury you.
She did wake up, but the ordeal wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She was paralyzed. Almost completely. For 3 years, she couldn't walk. She describes being curled up in a ball, her muscles atrophied in constant pain. She had to be moved on sheets by the other nuns.
I think we have to pause on this because it's so easy to just skip over that. 3 years of paralysis in your early 20s. That does something to a person's mind.
It breaks you, or it remakes you. For Teresa, this was the crucible. It stripped away all her vanity. You can't care about fashion when you can't move your legs.
All the worldly things she was worried about just became irrelevant.
Completely. It forced her inward. She had nowhere else to go but inside her own head.
So do you think this physical suffering is what triggered the mystical experiences? Is there a direct link?
There is a very strong correlation. In almost all mystical traditions, extreme suffering, fasting, or isolation acts as a gateway. It breaks the hold of the normal world. The brain starts to operate differently. This is when she started experiencing her devotions of ecstasy.
And this leads us to the big one. The vision that everyone knows, even if they don't know her name. The transverberation.
The piercing of the heart. This happened a bit later, around 1559. But it stems from this new openness to the supernatural that was forged in her illness.
Let's look at the source text, because her own description of it is it's wild. She describes seeing an angel.
And not a big, scary biblical angel, but a small, beautiful one, a seraph.
Right, and he's holding a long golden spear with a tip of fire. She writes, "He appeared to me to be thrusting it at times into my heart, and to pierce my very entrails. When he drew it out, he seemed to draw them out also, and to leave me all on fire with a great love of God."
It's incredibly visceral. It's not a gentle, passive vision. It's violent.
And then she says this, which is the part that always stops me. "The pain was so great that it made me moan, and yet so surpassing was the sweetness of this excessive pain that I could not wish to be rid of it."
Sweetness of excessive pain. That paradox is the core of her mysticism. It's an experience that obliterates the line between the body and the soul. It's agony and ecstasy in the same moment.
Now, we have to address the elephant in the room, or I guess the statue in the room. Bernini's famous sculpture of this moment in Rome.
Yes. The Ecstasy of Saint Teresa. It is a masterpiece of Baroque art. Absolutely stunning.
But if you look at it, Teresa is swooning. Her mouth is open. Her eyes are rolled back. Her limbs are limp. It looks orgasmic.
It does. There's no getting around it. And people have been pointing that out for centuries.
So what's the interpretation? Was she describing a spiritual sublimation of sexual energy?
Freud would certainly say so. And it's possible the language of mysticism often uses the language of lovers because that's the most intense human connection we have to compare it to. But modern science offers another lens.
The neurological lens.
Yes. Doctors and neurologists who have studied her diaries, which are incredibly detailed regarding her symptoms, almost like a medical chart, they've suggested she might have had temporal lobe epilepsy.
This is the Dostoevsky connection, right?
Exactly. Fyodor Dostoevsky also had epilepsy, and he described his seizures as beginning with a moment of eternal harmony, a flash of absolute clarity and joy right before the darkness hit.
And Teresa's descriptions match that.
They track very closely. The auditory hallucinations, the visions of light, the feeling of a presence, the loss of muscle control, it all lines up with what are known as ecstatic seizures.
Does that diminish the experience for you if we say, Oh, it was just a misfiring in the temporal lobe.
I don't think so. I think it depends on your worldview. If you're a materialist, you say it's just a misfire. If you're a believer, you might say that the brain is a receiver, and epilepsy just tunes the dial to a frequency that most of us can't hear. The biology doesn't negate the meaning she found in it.
It definitely helps explain the levitation, though, because that's another side effect she dealt with.
And I love that she hated it.
This is the best part.
It's my favorite detail about her. In the lives of most saints, miracles are like badges of honor. Look at me, I'm flying. Teresa found it mortifying, utterly humiliating.
So she's in the middle of deep prayer, maybe in the choir with the other nuns, and suddenly she starts floating off the ground.
And she would literally shout at the other nuns, "Hold me down!" She would have them come and sit on her. She would grab onto the grating of the choir for dear life.
That's amazing.
She was terrified that people would think she was a fraud, or, even worse, a show-off. She writes about it with such annoyance.
Lord, please stop making me float. I'm trying to run a business here.
Precisely. She prayed for God to stop giving her these public favors because they were bad for her reputation. She wanted to be taken seriously as a reformer, not seen as some kind of circus act.
And she needed to be taken seriously because she was about to take on the entire church establishment. This brings us to part 3. The reformer, or as you put it, the CEO of Carmel.
This is where we see the other side of Teresa. The mystic is fascinating, but the administrator is formidable.
So she's recovered from her illness, she's having these visions, and she looks around her convent, the convent of the Incarnation, and she doesn't like what she sees.
She realizes it's broken. The whole system is broken.
What was wrong with it? From the outside, it probably looked fine.
It was too comfortable. It was essentially a well-appointed boarding house for the daughters of the nobility.
Yeah.
There were 150 nuns. But the wealthy ones, they had their own suites of rooms, they brought their own maids with them.
Wait, nuns had maids?
Yes. If your family was rich, you lived a rich life inside the convent walls. They wore jewelry under their habits, they had lapdogs, and the worst part for Teresa was the parlor.
The locutoria.
The social scene. It was a revolving door. Noblemen, merchants, gossips from town. They would all come to the convent parlor to chat with the nuns, eat sweets, flirt, and talk business. It was a social club.
Not exactly a place for quiet contemplation.
Not at all. Teresa realized that in that environment, the interior castle, the silence she needed to find God, was impossible to build. There were too many distractions.
So she decides to go rogue.
She decides to found a new convent, a reboot. St. Joseph's or San Jose, and her vision was radical. Back to basics. She wanted to return to the primitive rule of Carmel from the 12th century.
This is where we get the term discalced.
Yes. Calced means shod or wearing shoes. Discalced means shoeless. It was a branding move. It was a statement.
What was this statement?
That they were embracing poverty. Her nuns would wear simple hemp sandals or go barefoot. It symbolized humility. No maids, no titles, no private suites, just a small community of 13 women living in silence and equality.
And I assume the other 150 nuns at the Hotel Incarnation were thrilled about this new, more rigorous model.
Oh, they were furious, absolutely livid. Nothing makes people angrier than someone else raising the moral bar. They felt judged. The townspeople were angry too because a convent that relies on begging is a drain on the local economy.
So she had opposition from all sides.
They tried to shut her down. The civil authorities of Ávila ordered it demolished. They threatened to tear the building down.
And the church leadership.
They were no better. The papal nuncio, the Pope's own representative in Spain, called her a fantastic insult.
Oh, what?
He called her a restless, gadabout woman.
A gadabout. It implies she's just wandering around, causing trouble, instead of staying in her cell where she belongs.
It was a deeply gendered slur. Women were supposed to be enclosed, seen, and not heard. But Teresa ignored him. She was 47 years old, which was considered elderly at the time, and she started a revolution.
She became a road warrior.
She did. This is the part that blows my mind. She didn't just build one convent. She built 17 of them.
17, in 15 years.
In 15 years. She crisscrossed Spain. And you have to remember, travel in the 16th century wasn't hopping on a train. It was sitting in an ox cart with no suspension on terrible roads.
For weeks at a time.
Weeks. It was freezing winters on the Castilian Plateau and scorching summers in Andalusia. She slept in roadside inns that were flea-infested. She writes about dealing with drunken drivers.
She's doing all this while managing the finances, hiring contractors, negotiating real estate deals, and dealing with lawyers.
She was a brilliant administrator. She wrote thousands of letters. We still have many of them. She knew how to charm wealthy donors. She knew how to manipulate bishops. She famously said, "God walks among the pots and pans."
What does it mean?
She refused to separate the spiritual from the logistical. For her, finding the money to fix a leaky roof was just as holy as prayer. It was all God's work.
She also recruited some help.
Yeah.
We have to mention her partner in crime, St. John of the Cross.
Juan de la Cruz. A fascinating figure. He was much younger than her, very slight of build. She used to joke that he was half a friar, but he was an intellectual and spiritual giant, a poet.
And she convinced him to join her cause.
She did. She recruited him to help her reform the men's side of the Carmelite order, and the backlash against him was even worse than what she faced.
That's so.
It was violent. The calloused of friars, the ones who liked their comfortable shoes and soft beds, they literally kidnapped John.
Kidnapped a monk.
They ambushed him, took him to their priory in Toledo, and imprisoned him in a tiny closet, essentially a cupboard.
You're kidding.
It was so small he couldn't stand up or lie down. It had been a latrine, so it had no window, just a small hole in the ceiling. They kept him there for 9 months.
That's torture.
It was. They took him out regularly to the refectory, the dining hall, to whip him in front of the community, to humiliate him.
That's just brutal.
It was a war. They were trying to break him. But in that darkness, in that closet, he composed some of the most beautiful poetry in the Spanish language, the spiritual canticle.
How did he get out?
He eventually escaped. He unscrewed the hinges of his door with his bare hands and climbed down a rope he'd made out of his bed sheets.
That is an action movie sequence.
It really is. And through all this, Teresa is fighting her own legal battles to keep her convents open. She's being investigated by the Inquisition again. They confiscated her autobiography, La Vida, to check it for heresy. She was literally writing for her life.
And that writing is what brings us to part 4, the cartographer of the soul. Because despite all the chaos, the travel, the politics, she managed to produce some of the most important texts in history.
The interior castle is her masterpiece, no question. But to understand it, I think we should start with her earlier metaphor from La Vida, the garden.
I found this so helpful. She's trying to explain something as abstract as prayer, but prayer is such a vague word. So she compares the soul to a garden that needs water.
Right. It's a very practical analogy. The soil is your soul. The plants are the virtues you're trying to grow, but they need water grace to grow. And she says there are 4 ways to water this garden.
Okay, what's stage 1?
Stage 1, drawing water from a well. This is the beginner stage. It's hard manual labor. You have to lower the bucket, pull it up, carry it to the plants, 1 bucket at a time.
So this represents what exactly?
Yeah. This represents mental prayer. It requires effort. You have to sit down, silence your phone or in her day, ignore the gossips in the parlor, and actively focus your mind on God. It's tiring. Your mind wanders, you get distracted. Most people stay here.
Okay, so what's stage 2?
The water wheel. A windlass or a noria, now you have a machine helping you. It's easier, you turn a crank, and more water comes up with less effort. This is the prayer of quiet.
A prayer of quiet.
Your will starts to surrender. You aren't fighting as hard to focus anymore. You start to feel a little bit of peace, a quiet joy. God is starting to help.
And stage 3?
A stream or a river. Now you aren't doing the work at all. You've diverted a stream to flow right through your garden. The ground is soaked. This is the prayer of union.
So what's happening in your mind at this point?
Your intellect, your memory, your reason, they all sort of go offline. You are just being with God. She says the memory might still buzz around like a gnat, but the core of you is at rest. It's blissful.
And finally, stage 4.
Rain, the best way to water a garden. You do absolutely nothing. The clouds open up and God does all the work. This is ecstasy or rapture.
Total surrender.
Total. The senses shut down. This is where the transverberation happens, where the levitation happens. You are completely passive in the hands of God.
It's such a clear progression from effort to surrender. And she expands on this spatial idea in the interior castle.
Massively. She wrote the interior castle in 1577, just 5 years before she died, under obedience to her confessor. She had a vision of the soul as a crystal globe, or a single perfect diamond in the shape of a castle. And inside this castle, there are 7 mansions or dwelling places.
And the goal is to get to the center.
Yes, the king god lives in the very center, in the 7th mansion. The journey is always inward.
So what are the early mansions like?
The first 3 mansions are about cleaning up your act. It's the purgative way. You're trying to get rid of your attachments to sin. You're practicing humility. You're praying regularly, being a good person. You're still in the courtyard of the castle, basically.
Okay, but then something shifts.
Something big shifts when you get to the 4th mansion. That's the transition point. That's where the supernatural takes over from your own effort. The prayer of quiet from the garden analogy happens here. God starts giving you gifts you didn't earn.
And the later mansions, 5, 6, and 7.
That's the unitive way. Full union. Mansion 5 is a deeper union. Mansion 6 she calls spiritual betrothal, like an engagement. It's full of ecstasies and raptures, but also intense suffering, the sweet pain. You're torn between a desire for God and the afflictions of the world.
And the 7th mansion, that's the end game.
That is spiritual marriage. And what's fascinating is that the fireworks stop. In the 6th mansion, you have the levitations, the visions, the drama. But in the 7th, it's just peace. A permanent, quiet, serene union. The struggle is over. You live with God now.
Now, you sent me a note about a theory that links this book to the foundation of modern philosophy. And this is a bit of a bombshell.
It is a real paradigm shift. This is the work of Professor Christian Mercer at Columbia University. And she asks a very simple question. We all know René Descartes, right?
I think, therefore I am, the father of rationalism.
The guy who decided that the only thing we can be absolutely sure of is the existence of our own mind.
Right. He's usually presented as the guy who broke away from religious superstition to start secular philosophy.
Exactly. But Mercer asks, where did he get the idea to retreat into the mind to find truth in the first place? It had to come from somewhere.
And the answer is Teresa.
The evidence is compelling. Descartes was educated by Jesuits in France at La Flèche. This was in the early 1600s. Teresa had just been canonized in 1622. Her books were international bestsellers, especially in France. Everyone was reading them.
So the intellectual atmosphere was just saturated with her idea.
Saturated.
Yeah.
And Mercer points out the parallels in their work. Teresa says the soul is an interior castle. Descartes treats the mind as a fortress against doubt.
Okay.
Teresa talks about reptiles and vermin distracting thoughts, trying to stop you from entering the castle. Descartes talks about a malicious, evil demon trying to deceive him at every turn.
The methodology is similar, too.
It's almost identical. Teresa builds her theology on radical introspection. Descartes builds his philosophy on radical introspection.
So I think, therefore I am, might actually be a secularized remix of Teresa's I pray, therefore I am.
It strongly suggests that one of the great pillars of Western male philosophy was actually lifted, consciously or not, from a Spanish female mystic. He basically took the map she drew, erased the God labels, and called it rationalism.
That is a mic drop moment for the 16th century. It completely changes how we view her intellectual weight. She wasn't just feeling things, she was analyzing the structure of consciousness.
Precisely. She was a phenomenologist centuries before the term existed.
Okay, we have covered the life, the reform, and the writing. Now we have to cover the end. Part 5. Death, time travel, and dismemberment.
I warned you, it gets macabre.
You did. First, the time travel. Teresa died in 1582, but she died on a very specific glitch-in-the-matrix type of night.
She did. It's a great piece of trivia. She was in Alba de Tormes, very sick. She died late in the night on October 4th, 1582. Well, that exact night was the moment Spain and the whole Catholic world switched from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar.
Because the old calendar was drifting out of sync with the seasons?
Right. The solstices were off. Easter was on the wrong date. To fix it, Pope Gregory XIII ordered that 10 days be deleted from the calendar. So the day after Thursday, October 4th, was not Friday, October 5th. It was Friday, October 15th.
So she died on the 4th and was buried on the 15th, but it was literally the next morning.
She effectively skipped 10 days of history. That's why her feast day is October 15th, not the 5th.
But she doesn't stay buried. This is where the zombie apocalypse vibe kicks in. 9 months later, they open the coffin. Why?
There was a dispute over where she should be buried. Ávila wanted her back, so they got permission to move the body. When they opened her coffin, they found that the clothes had rotted, the wood had rotted, but her body was perfectly intact.
Incorrupt, the classic sign of a saint.
It was flexible. It looked like she was sleeping, and they reported it smelled of flowers and earth, the so-called odor of sanctity.
Now, a normal reaction would be, wow, a miracle, let's close the lid and let her rest in peace. But that's not what happened.
No. That is not what happened. In the 16th century, relics were power. Relics were spiritual and economic capital. If you had a piece of a saint, you had a direct line to God, and you had a major tourist attraction.
So the church and her own order started to dismember her.
They carved her up like a Thanksgiving turkey. It's grim.
I have the list here, and it is disturbing.
It's a literal body of evidence scattered across Europe. Her right foot and part of her upper jaw are in Rome. Her left hand is in a convent in Lisbon, Portugal. Her other left hand...
But she had two left hands.
The hand from the arm that was removed, that hand is in Ronda, Spain.
The Ronda hand has a very specific dark history.
It does. Francisco Franco, the fascist dictator of Spain, got a hold of that relic. He became obsessed with it.
What do you mean obsessed?
He kept it by his bedside for decades. He even traveled with it. He slept with the reliquary on his nightstand until the day he died in 1975.
The irony is suffocating. You have a woman who was the granddaughter of a persecuted Jew, a woman who fought the establishment her whole life, and she ends up being the lucky charm for a nationalist dictator.
Franco saw her as the symbol of the old Spain. Pure, Catholic, rigid, authoritarian. He projected his own values onto her. It's a classic example of how historical figures get hijacked for political purposes.
And we can't forget the finger. This is the story that sounds like a pirate movie.
Father Geronimo Gracian, he was her close friend, her spiritual director, her confessor. He was there when they were distributing the relic. And he decided he wanted a keepsake. So he took her little finger.
He just took it.
He cut it off. He kept it in a small vial around his neck. Years later, he was traveling the Mediterranean, and his ship was captured by Barbary corsairs pirates from North Africa. He was taken to Tunis to be sold into slavery.
And he didn't have cash for ransom.
He didn't, but he had the finger and the valuable reliquary it was in. He used it to buy his freedom, or at least it was part of the transaction. He traded a saint's digit for his life.
That finger has seen more of the world than most people.
It eventually made its way back to Europe. But it just shows you the desperation. People wanted to physically touch the holy because they felt so far from it.
And this isn't just ancient history. In August 2024, just a couple of years ago from our perspective, they opened the coffin again in Alba de Tormes.
They did what's called a canonical recognition. They brought in doctors and scientists to examine the remains. And the postulator general for the cause of saints announced that the body is in the exact same condition as it was in 1914, which was the last time it was photographed.
Still incorrupt.
Still incorrupt. Her heart is still there in a glass jar, and devotees claim you can still see the scar from the angel's spear.
It's the ultimate paradox, isn't it? This is a woman who spent her whole life trying to detach from the body, teaching that the body is just a shell for the soul. And now, 400 years later, we are obsessed with her shell.
She wanted to disappear into the interior castle, and we dragged her out and scattered her across the map. She wanted silence, and she became a global celebrity.
So, bringing it all home, we've looked at the rebel, the invalid, the CEO, and the relic. What is the legacy?
Well, officially, she was canonized in 1622. In 1970, she was named a Doctor of the Church by Pope Paul VI, the first woman ever to receive the title. That means her teaching is considered essential for the whole church.
And she's the patron saint of a few things.
She's the co-patron saint of Spain, along with Santiago. She's the patron of headache sufferers, which makes total sense given her life.
And chess players. I love this detail.
Yes, that's my favorite little detail. In The Way of Perfection, she uses a chess analogy. She talks about how in prayer you have to be clever to checkmate the king god using the piece of humility.
And the Inquisition didn't like that.
And no, they thought it was too worldly. Chess was seen as a gambling game, slightly vice-adjacent. They wanted her to take it out. She refused.
Tit for?
She argued that you have to use language people understand. She was a pragmatist to the end.
So what's the deep dive takeaway? If we strip away the miracles and the pirate stories and the incorrupt body, what does Teresa of Ávila say to us today?
I think it comes back to the interior castle. Teresa lived in a time of incredible chaos. Wars of religion, the Inquisition, plague, social upheaval. It wasn't a calm, peaceful era, but she argued that you can build a space inside yourself that is untouchable.
A fortress of silence.
Exactly. She teaches that you are not your circumstances, you are not your illness, you are not your family history, you are not your social status. There's a diamond in the center of you where you can go to be safe and whole.
And that feels incredibly relevant. We don't have the Inquisition, but we have the attention economy. We have a world that is constantly banging on the door of our minds trying to get in.
We've let the drawbridge down. We broadcast our interior thoughts on social media. We invite the reptiles, the noise, the anger, the distraction right into the castle.
So the challenge she leaves us with is, can you pull up the drawbridge? Do you even know where the key is anymore?
It's a question worth asking. In a world of noise, silence might be the ultimate act of rebellion.
I think I'm going to go turn my phone off for a bit.
Not a bad idea.
Thanks for diving deep with us on Teresa of Ávila. It's been a wild ride.
It's been a pleasure.
See you next time.